Welcome to the Starting SaaS podcast. My name is Michaela Richmond, and this podcast is all about creating a foundation for SaaS. Welcome to today's episode. Today, I have on Alex Nelson. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Michaela. It's a pleasure to be here. Honestly, an honor.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so today you are here to talk to us about being an SDR. So give, I guess, a little bit of a background. How did you get to being an SDR where you are today?
Okay, so yeah, I graduated college in 2019 and I didn't have a job when I graduated. Sales was always hiring. So I was on the hunt for a job and I got an SDR job at a conference company that put on executive level conferences for startups to Fortune 500 companies. Anyway, I was there for 4 months until COVID. All we did was really social selling. I didn't do a lot of cold calling. But anyway, 361 days later, I remember it for that number just because it was like the same week that I had been laid off. A year later, I landed at PandaDoc. I had something to prove since I started as an SDR because of all the rejection I faced. So I hit the phones hard, emails hard, whatever. But yeah, that's a sort of my story.
Okay, can you give a background? What is the difference? Like, what is social selling?
Social selling is like using LinkedIn messaging to like create the opportunities rather than, I could go into like people could use Twitter or Facebook or Instagram social sell, but LinkedIn is was the only platform I had to really do my job in my first BDR role, I would say.
Is there a specific way that social selling works best? Because right now, at least there's a lot of that going on and people have lost trust. Like I know that if people come into my DMs too much, I get really annoyed. So how do you have to go about social selling well?
So it was a trial and error process for me. I had definitely a very high activity rate when I was only using LinkedIn. I would send like really, really long messages to these people. It wouldn't work a lot of the time, but obviously like a small percentage in sales usually works. Now when I use LinkedIn as my mode of communication, I'm very brief. I'll say 3 sentences max. I'll essentially say like, hey, thanks for accepting. And I'll try to build curiosity and say, is this a pain for you? And if they respond, then I'll try to book the meeting that way. But these days, I spend way more time cold calling and emailing now that I have those resources for sure.
So as an SDR, what does your day-to-day look like?
Well, wake up, brush my teeth. So I don't know. I like to wake up a little bit before 9 because like 8 a.m. for the people in the East Coast is a good time it's a good time for connect rates. Then I have a meeting at 9. Honestly, I these days will spend a lot more time on Salesforce looking for good accounts rather than what I did when I first started, which was just load up 1 million people into cadences, make 200 dials a day, book some of them, and my no-show rate was a little bit higher at first for sure. So it's a little bit different now, but I would say like my days are on Salesforce and SalesLoft. I make probably upwards of 80 dials consistently these days. During like, I would say 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Those are like those are the hours where people are less likely to pick up the phone. So that's when I'll do my emailing or LinkedIn messaging. I'll make my calls during those times a little bit, but really my big dial, blocks are 8 to 10 a.m. and then 4 to 6 p.m. because, that's when people like to press the green button rather than the red one.
Nice. That was comprehensive. Thank you. Okay, so the idea behind SDRs is you have an MDR or an LDR first, and they kind of comb through everything and I guess send more qualified leads to the SDR. And then your SDR further qualifies them, may set up a meeting, may go through cold calling or some sort of prospecting in that way. And then if they get another green light, then it goes to the AE.
That's how it works for the most part. I would say that like there's definitely a piece of prospecting for the SDR. Like we have MDRs, but I've been developing these accounts for a really long time. So I would say probably upwards of 50% of the people that I reach out to these days are warm. So that probably takes more so of my time than the MDR counts, but I think you hit the process pretty well. Starts with the MDR, SDR, and then big bad AEs. Like I'm about to be.
Hey, you gotta do what you gotta do. You mentioned that there's a difference between a good account and a not good account, and I would imagine that you mean qualified, right? Something that's higher in the qualification level. What is the difference?
Yeah, so I would say that that's how you could sum it up. Like I could break it down a little bit further. In order to call it qualified, there has to be a use case, and there's a lot of variables that go into like qualifying the accounts based on how many touches have been, how many times they've been contacted in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So like somebody that's completely unfamiliar with PandaDoc, but has pain in the areas that I'm talking about is less likely than somebody who has been exposed to PandaDoc and knows about our brand awareness and how we stack up in our market. So like there's a lot of that, like that question is just very, very layered, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You said that your system changed. Like before, it was kind of like a let me just go and do as many as possible, and let me not look through the qualification and spend time doing that. And then it changed. Why did it change?
Well, I would definitely just like there's a not so fun answer to that question, which is that the opportunities that come from cold calls are less qualified. And like I mastered the feature and benefit pitch. I mastered talking about PandaDoc in an attractive way to our ideal personas. Sometimes those meetings would just be product tours. They would just be interested in seeing what I had to say. So my process changed based on earlier on. I was getting closed deals, but it was mostly the smaller. My ACV was very, very low, like average contract value, very low. So over time, I sort of developed an eye for like looking on not just like the accounts that have had a little bit of activity, so there's a little bit of rapport there, but the ones that have more seats and have better use cases so that it's less work for my AE and also like it's predictable.
Okay, so you're always looking to make less work for your AE. So what are the conversations that they're having versus the conversations that an SDR is having?
So the SDR deals with the people that I guess don't like know what PandaDoc is fully enough to seek out the opportunity. And so I'm an outbound, I guess, and it's a difference between outbound and inbound. Inbound will just qualify these accounts, ask the best questions, get all the information possible. The AE conversation is just pushing the sale along. So during the SDR stage, that could take a really long amount of time to get the right decision maker in the meeting and to get that decision maker to actually value it. The AE should get the opportunity when it's ready to move. So, like, I would say that the AE's process in an ideal world is probably less long than the SDR process because we market as much as we sell.
Okay. You mentioned the features and benefits. So you got really, really fantastic with feature and benefit pitching.
Mhm.
Um, is it so? Was that your desire from the very beginning, from the offset? You were like, okay, I need to be able to sell my product well, and the way to do that is the feature and benefit pitch, or did you adapt? Like, did you learn eventually that that was the best way to sell your product?
So from my 4 months prior to PandaDoc of BDR experience, I was I had the opportunity to like work with the top AE at the company that I was at, and he was a beast. He was fantastic. Um, but we sold conference sponsorships. I believe he closed upwards of 4 mil the year that I was there, and I sort of was just trying to emulate what he was doing. He was opening with a social proof, saying all these things like you have to be there because of X, Y, Z person, these companies, and so naturally carrying over like technology, which is completely different. I was just trying to bring up the most just attractive qualities about PandaDoc, like putting myself in shoes where I have been called on to buy things in the past. I've wanted others to be clear about what they're offering.
Mm-hmm.
So I've just, at first, I thought the best thing to do is just tell them everything about what we are and where we could help. Um,
Mm-hmm.
tell them that they like that it's the best option for them. And over time, I've sort of known to make it about the prospect because like a sales call is sort of like a tug of war of information, and it's really only going to resonate if there's pain. So
Yeah.
that took a while, I guess, for me to sort of not like not realize as much as like implement, like
Mm-hmm.
making it about the other person. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that like people, sales leaders think of when they require sales experience for SDRs is how to talk to prospects about their pain and their issues rather than the product, because that's what I was doing at first, at least, just talking about the product a lot. Anyway,
Okay. And you do that by asking the right questions?
yeah, yes. I mean, there's, I guess, multiple layers there, like, but I would say like question asking is definitely one of the very, very big things. And second is like follow ups and making sure you're aligned on timeline. But like there are high priority calls to make on a daily basis, and there are lower priority calls. And one day I just sort of realized, why don't I just make the high priority ones? Am I sounding completely confusing?
No, this makes a lot of sense.
Okay, I feel like I'm just doing like,
No. It makes a lot of sense. Like, the coolest thing for me is because this is very, very back to basics. Like, this is super fundamental. I get to build my understanding of like how all of these pieces work together and how different people figure it out. Because like figuring out how something works, it usually takes some experience. You know,
mhm.
it's not like an information overload and then okay, you finally get it and it all clicks. Um, so it's really, really cool to learn from you how it works and like how you learned that it works.
Just to like give a story, like the story of how I started with like PandaDoc and sort of got to this mindset is like I'm somebody who learns by making mistakes. I always have like I'm like socially awkward, so I put myself in. I'm not actually like I don't think I am, but I'm socially awkward enough that I feel like I need to put myself out there when it comes to like situations where I'm not fully comfortable. And that's I've throughout my life I've just been doing that and making mistakes doing it. And so when I first started as an SDR, I let myself make the mistakes. I just did as much activity as possible. I made like over 120 calls every day, and I faced enough rejection that I was just numb to it at a certain point. So something that I, you know, would prescribe for the right type of person is when you're an SDR and you have a bunch of really blank accounts to start, and you're first starting in your like first SDR role, one thing you could do to set yourself up for the future is just make a ton of calls. It sounds like simple, but a lot of like I was one of the very few that did it. just make a ton so you get all that rejection, you hear all of those objections, and you're like a month later, you will just be very prepared. And it won't like, it's not going to come like overnight, but it's something that you're going to realize. And at that point, you're not going to have to do all that activity anymore.
Yeah, you mentioned hearing all of the objections. I think that's really interesting, because usually they'll all fall into a certain category, and I imagine that you kind of have not a formula, but you know what to answer for different types of objections because most of the time they're pretty similar.
Yeah. It takes like time to realize, but after a while, you sort of realize that like 80% of the objections all fall in the same bucket of like the same five. Like, send me an email.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not the right person. I'm not interested enough to give this a look. It's not a priority for us. And like, I don't know, it's probably like those four. I don't know if there's another one.
Mm-hmm.
And just if you could, I know I'm talking about something that's like very specific to my experience, but if you face all those, you have the chance when you first start as an SDR to hear all of those more quickly than not, just by calling and just by trying and working as hard as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely look back and I'm grateful that I did that because of all the things that I learned in that shorter period of time. It set me up for the future for sure.
So that was your own desire though. Like whenever you get into being an SDR, you have a certain amount that you're expected to do, but you went in full force and you're like, all right, I'm going to be the best. I'm going to like just do my best. And that mindset allowed you to come out with this understanding.
Yeah, like I was obsessed with refreshing our stats, and I wouldn't let like two consecutive days go by where I didn't lead in calls. And there was a lot of things that I did just to position myself so that at the end of the day, I could at least say I did as much as everybody else. The results might not be the same thing, but at least, I don't know. I had some trauma from my unemployment, and this was sort of my coping mechanism, was just doing a ton of work. But if you in mind think like, I'm going to make 100 calls every day during my first 2 months as SDR so that I learn all the objections that I'm going to face, I think that that's a formula that like would help anybody
Mm-hmm.
develop quickly.
Mm-hmm. So the rejection, like that's something that's always hard for people to get past.
Mhm.
A part of it was repetition, but was there anything else that you used to help you deal with the rejection and just like that consistent no, no, no?
So I don't know, like no, when I was an SDR, but just to take a step back, like I went from being interviewed by over like 100 people, hearing their ideologies about how to be an SDR, and then being rejected by those people. And then, so by the time I was an SDR, the objection to PandaDoc felt like nothing compared to the rejection to me. So I had faced
Ah,
a lot of rejection. Like it was nothing to talk to. I was just tired of talking about myself in these interviews because, like, what is my greatest strength? I don't know. You tell me. Like, interviewing is so annoying. So, but talking about product seemed like nothing after that. So, like, I wouldn't say to anybody, hey, go be unemployed and fail at a bunch of job interviews for a year and you'll be able to handle rejection. But like, I suppose like you could try to think of one thing in life where rejection is a little bit more real compared to work.
mm,
Like, my work life is different than real life. Cold calling could be like, you could be sensitive to it or you could treat it like
mm,
a game. And everybody I think that's successful at it treats it like a game,
mm-hmm,
like follows the numbers, if that makes sense.
mm-hmm. No, that's amazing. So like you disconnected. It wasn't rejection of PandaDoc is not rejection of you, and that
Yeah.
allows you to continue.
Yeah. And also like one thing is that most of my friends in real life are not in sales. So
Mm,
naturally, and also like being raised, I definitely think my parents weren't the biggest fans of salespeople. So like I naturally had big sort of barrier,
Mm,
and like having to explain my job to my friends that weren't in sales, not using terms like quotas and KPIs and all these sales terms, it helped me because I knew how to speak in a language to people about my job and about PandaDoc that wasn't
mm,
technical early
mm-hmm,
on, just because, I wasn't like around salespeople as much as I am now.
mm-hmm. How did you explain that to them? What were the things that you focused on instead of the KPIs and instead of the quotas? And whenever you explain sales to somebody that doesn't understand it as much or that doesn't like it, how do you go about that?
Yeah, it's just like breaking it down into elementary terms, like sort of pretending like you're talking to somebody on the street who's asking you for directions. Like I'll say, hey, like they got like I only talk about a selective number of things. Like if I'm talking to one of my friends and they ask me about my job, I'll be like, I made 100 calls today. I'm so tired. So like my friends, it's kind of funny. Like one of my best friends told me not that long ago, he was just like Alex, like I don't mean to like offend you when I say this, but when you talk about work, sometimes I have no idea what you're talking about. So like it's it's like a difficult question to answer, but the best thing you can say is like take the take the sentence and only take the most important thing or the words that like could make sense to a child or a foreign person or a stranger. Or pick your pick your person that isn't in SaaS, you know?
How do you explain SaaS to people that aren't in SaaS? Do you even try?
Eh, why?
It's so difficult.
Yeah, no, I mean it's like I feel like it's just a very we're growing. Like SaaS is everybody's going to need to know what it is soon.
Hmm.
So I just say it's like tech, like software, but that doesn't
Yeah.
sound fun at all. Like if
No,
I'm
I
like
mean it does
at a
actually
bar,
though.
if I'm at a bar and somebody asks me what I do and it's like software sales, I'm like I feel like
Yeah,
that's
no.
just a monotone thing to say.
No, yeah, yeah. Software sales doesn't do it justice.
Mm, yeah. What's a good alternative?
I don't know. I always say, "Oh, I'm in tech."
Yeah, all right, that works. But like that sounds like you're in IT, like you're fixing a bunch of computers.
Well, you could say I work for a startup. That sounds cool.
Yeah, that's what you need to say. You like, I'm a salesperson for a startup for an exciting.
Yeah, I mean, hey, it does it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a couple more questions and then I'll hit you with some rapid fire and then we'll wrap it up. Um, whenever you are whenever you go through your system, it's usually IDing, you analyze the qualified leads, and then you go through with calling and setting up meetings, right? So it's
Mhm.
ID, analyze, and then set up meetings slash
Yeah.
go through with action.
Yeah. Spot, qualify,
What is
call.
spotting?
Just like find it, like spot it.
Okay,
Like
okay, 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 gotcha. So spot, qualify, call is kind of the
blow up until they put you on do not contact now. But yeah, that's kind of how it goes. It's 3 steps.
okay. Do you have like a limit for yourself? Are you like, I won't call this many times, or I'll email a couple times and then I'll call? Do you have like a cadence that you like to do or no?
My sales loft right now, like my call steps, I have like over 1,000 in there, and
Oh my gosh.
people are like mad at me about it. Like, I don't know. Anyway, so the answer is honestly no. I wish it was yes. Like I wish I could respond like, yeah, like after I get to 80 calls, I'm a normal person and I stop dialing. Like, no, it's just like when I like feel like I can't do it anymore or just have these days I have a lot of meetings. So I have
Mm-hmm.
other things to do. But
Mm-hmm.
I would
Is
say like
there
there's no number that I
so,
would be.
so is there a point whenever it's like diminishing returns and it's obvious to you that it's not going to help you to call them more or to do anything more? Like when do you reach that point?
Probably. I don't have the self-awareness, but probably like I probably sound worse on my 200th call than my second, but like, yeah, I mean, like these days I probably won't make over 100, like 30-ish, but I also won't
Mm-hmm.
make less than 65.
Mm-hmm.
Our team minimum is 75. So, if I make 65, I get somebody just running after me with a, I don't know, sword. I'm kidding. Nobody cares. But yeah, I would say like I'm more concerned with the minimums than the maximums.
Mm,
And there probably is diminishing returns. I would definitely say on during days where I'm more careful and deliberate, like rather than calling in two tabs, like which I used to do sometimes, actually looking through all the notes, and that pays off. Doing the little
mm-hmm.
bit extra legwork pays off.
Mm-hmm. Um, so you work with a lot of SDRs. You are a really good SDR. What have you seen is the difference between good SDRs and SDRs that lag behind the good ones?
I would say that there's there's a few things. I'm like thinking of like three shining examples in my head of different people and how I think they are fantastic. I would definitely say being very detail oriented, making sure that you are on top of your follow ups and reminders is enough if you're making the right calls to hit your quotas. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like my very good friend Sarah, I would say like that's her biggest strength. But like then there's Jed, who you spoke to, and he's always inventing new tactics. He's very creative with it. So like I would just say like what differentiates, like in my eyes, the core people from the top performers is just it has to be like something internal. Like it has to be the motivation.
Mm,
We like I set myself to really high goals, but I also set myself to reasonable goals to make sure that I'm always on track.
mm,
Like core reps, like the ones on like at PandaDoc are like it's hard even to call them core. Like they're phenomenal. Like I have so many takeaways from them. Um, but I would just say like being motivated to not just be good at your job, but to go beyond and to have other goals in mind, progression, and also like just being very, I don't know. I'm like opening up a huge can of worms right now, and I feel like I'm losing it. But essentially, like it's not something that you're going to learn from a presentation. It's not
mm-hmm.
something you're going to like read on an SDR manual. You have to just really, really want to be the best
Mm-hmm.
or better, be in the top three.
Okay, my last question before our rapid fire questions is, um, so you mentioned that you're about to go into an AE role. That's your next move. We're not supposed to say anything, so hypothetically, I mean, that is the natural progression. So eventually, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, how are you preparing? Like, how have you prepared over your time as an SDR to be a good AE?
Yeah. So I went into the SDR role wanting to be an AE right away. I only applied to AE jobs to start my unemployment, search.
Hmm.
So it was always like what I wanted to do next. But to prepare, I would just, I've been watching a lot of like demos from a few reps at PandaDoc that just kill it. Working with like I have two mentors right now that are just phenomenal and like don't ask anything from me. So I would definitely say like don't just stay inside your bubble. Look for guidance from the people that have been there and have done it successfully. And also like I've just been like like tracking my own opportunities that have won versus the ones that haven't. What type of decision makers and what did I do differently? And I don't know. There's a lot of things that I like to ask like Quincy or Brian, like the AEs at PandaDoc, like what are you doing towards the end of deal stages to make sure that deals are closing? And it's just, I think, making like having the motivation and having the curiosity, being
Mm-hmm.
curious and wanting to learn constantly is like what fuels me to like prepare. And when like I don't want to just be like an okay AE. Like I want to be top of the list. I want to be ahead of these people that I just named. Like I want so it's just it's difficult to sort of explain the preparation that I that I'm doing outside of just like watching people, but
Mm-hmm.
like that's a lot of it.
No,
Just
it is. You learn so much by asking questions.
and I'm blessed with my mentors, so like they could be like mean, but they're cool. You know, people could always be mean. I like nice people.
That's good. That's good. I'm glad to hear. So you said one thing that you said that I wanted to ask you a question about. So you said that you asked them about them closing deals, like the difference between them actually getting that deal closed and them not. What is their usual response? Like what is the difference between closing and not closing?
They're always just like, yo, like relax, Alex. Like you're asking me something so specific. They're like it varies from case to case. Like I'll like I'll like think of a scenario, like and just like be like, hey, like Quincy, like what if this happens and this happens? What are you doing? Like has that ever happened to you? He's just like dude, like it usually happens when I'm here's an example. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just like when you're an SDR and you want to be an AE, I think you have the tendency, I guess I've seen in me and the people around me that want to be A's to overcomplicate things or look for all the answers because, you know, you can't see for yourself.
Mm.
But yeah, I would say that the responses are all usually like it's more simple than you think.
Hmm. I like it. I like it. Okay. You ready for these rapid fire questions?
Oh man, you don't want to know how ready I am. I'm ready.
Okay. What is the biggest challenge you faced?
Like being patient.
Mm,
Like I had to be patient due to like a lot of just shifting pieces at PandaDoc and like I wanted to be an AE sooner, but I've realized like I've learned more out of in the last 6 months than I learned in the 6 months prior. And if
mm,
I were thrust into the AE position 6 months ago,
mm-hmm.
it would have like I would have done it. I probably would have hit my targets. Like I wasn't missing, but but I notice now that I really was able to cover all the corners that I wanted to. So like
Mm,
being patient was tough, but I think that I've learned over the last year how to be patient in general.
I love that.
Yeah.
So it's like time is so underrated. I've been thinking about that a lot. Like you can't see the things that are going to happen in 6 months to a year. You can't plan for them. You just have to kind of, I don't know, buckle up.
What I used to say is or what I say now is that I used to feel like I lived life in a rush. And
Mm,
like one day I just had a snap decision, like, why don't you like just chill? And
mm.
now like I feel like my friends get annoyed with me because I'm always late to things, but it's like time equals money. It's just that's just facts. You know the vibes. Anyway,
I know the vibes.
you know the vibes for sure. If there's anything about Michaela that I know, it's that you know the vibes.
I do know the vibes. Okay, next question. What I asked you this in the beginning, but I don't know if after the conversation you have thought about it a little bit more. What do you wish you knew whenever you started as an SDR in SaaS, whatever?
Um, I wish I knew where the best accounts were. I wish I knew. I wish I knew like how to use Salesforce. I think that like
Oh,
figuring out like that tech stuff and knowing where to look,
yeah.
it took me a while, but I have to
Mm,
do way less work now to I used to have to do so much work, like
mm.
write pitches, do the pitches, write down my objections, handle those objections. Now it's like just figure out Salesforce. I wish I knew how to use Salesforce.
Were you an MDR or did you do anything before SDR or no? You
No,
just went straight in. Okay, gotcha. Because so
that's right.
whenever that's a lot. Whenever I was talking to Jed, he was like, I was an MDR first, and it was annoying sometimes, but like he knew the tech stack well, and that was really, really beneficial for him.
Jed, yeah, like that. If I have no worries about like the MDRs that have moved into SDR positions at
Mm-hmm.
PandaDoc. I mean, the tech stuff, like first off, that helps so much. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
just I thinking back to when I first started, I would I was lost. I was just a lost boy in the world, like not knowing anywhere to go.
Like,
But
what does this do?
yeah, so like that's key, but also like yeah, like just having the tech background, it
Mm-hmm.
makes so much sense.
Mm-hmm.
When I was applying for jobs and it said you need a year on Salesforce, I was like, this seems silly, but
Mm-hmm.
makes a lot of sense.
That's funny. Do you have any tips for getting good at Salesforce
Like
other than doing it?
create reports, like I don't know, like use it. I it's such a big animal to tackle, but once you're there, like no, it's like a big animal to tackle, and
Yeah,
once you're there, it just like opens up the world. You see all the horizons, not just the one outside your window.
that's really funny. Okay, what is your favorite aspect of SaaS?
I like the people a lot. I think everybody's just wants to help. Like when I first started posting on LinkedIn, I was very surprised by the reception
Mm,
and how much like help like these people were actually like giving me. Like it wasn't just opinions. It was really like you should read this book, you should take this course,
mm,
you should try out this tactic. So I would just say like the SaaS environment knows that like it takes like it's a network and we grow on each other. And I would just say that being in sales and being comfortable asking questions, it's like it being comfortable asking questions gets has helped me gain so much wisdom and knowledge. Not that I'm an expert, but hopefully I am.
I love that. Okay, one question before I ask you for recommended resources. Um, what are your tips for posting and building an audience on LinkedIn? Because you've done that pretty successfully, and everybody starts somewhere.
Yeah, I would say that one is to really just like not care about the engagements,
Mm-hmm.
but like just like if you post every day for a while, like the consistency beats
Mm-hmm.
any sort of, I don't know. Regardless of that, though, one big piece that I always say whenever I'm asked is peer editing. Like
Okay.
like nobody thinks about this. Nobody thinks about peer editing. Everybody just thinks that everybody's just posting their own thoughts, and I do now. I don't really put it through somebody anymore, but I would say like my first 30 posts I sent to Jed or somebody else, like, hey, before I put this out into the public, is that a normal thought? And
Mm-hmm.
that gave me the confidence to do it. And like, I think that just in general, like taking small steps to get places is key. And if you and somebody are having a conversation, like maybe I should start posting on LinkedIn, hold each other accountable and start doing it because like you're going to learn through practice by making mistakes if you want. And there's like pointers that you could find on the internet, like, yeah, like you should make your first sentence and your third sentence sort of pop so that people open the preview. But at the end of the day, like it's really simple. Like having a peer editor gave me the confidence and support, and it helped me know and think of ideas to post. And it's just like all about starting somewhere.
I love that.
I love
It,
it too. Well, not to pat
no,
myself on the
it
back.
helps. It helps so much. I totally agree. I have a couple of friends that look over something and they'll just make sure it's fluid or make sure you have moments. Like sometimes my writing's good and other times it is not.
Yeah, my writing has gotten better since I started posting. I think
That's
it was
awesome.
like though, but
The
yeah,
consistency and stuff.
yeah. Well, it's just I like it's also like people that you know often when I see people that try to build their brands on LinkedIn, make really complex posts, and I think it's
Mm,
also just like over time, if you start posting, you're going to start posting more simple thoughts. and the
Mm,
simple thoughts are what people relate to or get people thinking. So
mm, I love
having
that.
the small concrete ideas and presenting it in a way that's presentable, if,
Concrete.
if you will. Yeah, concrete is a great word. I love the word concrete.
It's actually a good word. Okay. Do you have any final resources for anybody who's either trying to, get into SaaS, understand being an SDR more, sales?
Yeah, follow me on LinkedIn. No, but
I'll put
that
your stuff underneath in the description for sure.
but I would just like say like I have learned everything that I've learned from either like asking the people around me or just getting out there and doing it.
Hmm.
So one thing is just like I've had a great support system since I started in SaaS, like PandaDoc, and also just in real life, like my support system's great. So like I would just say like when you're getting into it, don't overcomplicate it, get involved and feel comfortable or do whatever you are curious, like ask the questions to those around you. Like people are there to support you. There's sales enablement at probably like every company now. There's all kinds of resources. Like don't get mad at yourself for failing at something independently. Just ask why it didn't work to somebody else and get other perspectives.
No, I love that. So use your network. Like instead of going out and finding different resources, there are actually so many free resources online. Like so many different Slack groups, so many different people to follow on LinkedIn.
I've learned so little on my own. Well, I
Yeah.
don't know if that's true, but I would just say like I've been blessed with very, very good mentors since day one. And I don't think I would have learned as much so quickly if they were half as good as they were. So,
Mm-hmm.
or if
Mm-hmm.
I was just afraid to ask those questions.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really important. Well, that's an amazing note to end it on. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been actually so much fun. All,
uh,
all the vibes.
oh, immaculate.